Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to lesson 12 in module 3. Today we're still talking about subtraction in our fractions. We're subtracting fractions. And today all of our fractions are going to be greater than or equal to 1. So we're going away from just little fractions to like a little bit bigger fractions. Two methods that we want to take a look at today as we're doing this. So think about which method looks the best for you and your understanding. I'm going to start off with problem 1. Problem 1 is kind of a simple one. It's going to help us get going here. We got 1. I can do better one than that. 1 and 1/5. And we're going to subtract. Nope, not 2. Hey, jeez. We're going to subtract out a half. And as we're looking at these problems, I'm going to want us to be doing number lines so that you can kind of visualize exactly what's happening here. So make a little number line over here. It's almost like a number hill. It goes up. And I'm going to have a 0 on this one. So I'm going to start at 1 and 1/5. So I'm going to have 1. And I'm starting here at 1 and 1/5, roughly here. And I'm going to subtract a half. My other half line would be here, and this would be 2. So my other half line would be here. So I'm going to subtract a half. I'm going to end up probably someplace right here, minus 1/2. And that's going to be about where I'm at. So there's two different methods here, and we're going to illustrate them both by showing this up here. I can either subtract out the half from my 1. Okay, so what I can do is to give you a visual here. I have a 0. I have my 1. If I started out with my whole, and I just take my whole and I subtract my half, bink, I end up here, right, at 1/2 mark. So I subtracted my half, okay, and I still have my 1/5. So I would have to add back my 1/5, and ultimately I will be doing 1/2 plus 1/5, which I would need to turn into tenths. And I would get my answer. What we're doing here is I want you to imagine that, I have a cake, and I have 1 and 1/5 of a cake. So that's going to show me that, I got like 1 and I got my 1/5 of a cake here. And let's say some Yahoo comes in and they ask me for half a cake. And I'm going to say, all right, well, rather than cutting up like this and then cutting up this and giving you some of this cake, I'm just going to put this cake over here on the side. I'm not going to worry about it. And this cake here, I'm just going to straight up cut it off and give you this half of the cake. You can take that one, okay? So that's gone. And what I'm left with is this half of a cake and my original 1/5 of a cake, which I need to add together to find out how much cake I have left. Does that make sense? So up here on my number line, I have my whole cake. And I'm just going to give away my half a cake. So I'm back to a half a cake. I have my half cake here. And I still have that 1/5 of a cake. So now I'm going to add those two together to find out what I have left. 1/2 in tenths is 5/10. And 1/5 in tenths would be 2/10. And so when I renamed those, I used my tenths. And 5 plus 2 would be 7/10. And that would be my answer on this one. The other method I have here is where I am just subtracting my my 1/2 from 1 and 1/5. So how many tenths is in 1 and 1/5? Well, this is where we're doing the other method where, okay, here's my cake again, right? Gosh, I love cake. I get so hungry for cake when I do this. Cake. I have my 1 and 1/5 cake, and somebody's coming in. And they're like, hey, look, can I have a half cake? They must have a party or something going on. And so I'm going to say, yep, sure. I'm going to start you off with this cake over here, and we'll take whatever we need from this cake too. So what I need to do is I need to automatically split these two in tenths, because I know that's my common denominator is tenths, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, so I have there's my fifths, and now cutting them in half. I hope you know why, to get my tenths. And so here I have 10 tenths, right? And here I have 2/10, and so I have a total of 12 tenths of cake in this. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my 1 1/5 and I've turned it into tenths, and so now I have 12 tenths. Now I can subtract out my half. Half in tenths is 5 tenths. So yeah, that's a half. These are the same. And so I'm taking my 12 tenths and I'm subtracting out my 5 tenths to get 7 tenths. Okay, same answer, two different ways of doing it. And I'm just going to go over this real quick because I want you to make sure that you're with me. On this one over here, this method 1, whoa, and this is kind of hard to see. I'm going to take that off. Let's go with white. Over here on my method 1, I took my 1/2 or my 1 1/5, and I just took my half that I'm subtracting. I took it off from this one, and so here's my whole. And then I have my 1, and I took off a half of it to leave me with a half. And then I had my 1/5 that I had to add into my half to give me 7 tenths. Okay, so you can always take away what you have to from the whole and see what you have left and add those two together. Or on this one, I took my 1 1/2. This is method 2. I took my 1 1/5 and I just turned it into tenths because that's my common denominator. So I said, well, I have 10 tenths here and I have 2 tenths here, and so I have a total of 12 tenths. And I needed to take away 5 tenths, and that got me 7 tenths. So I can see the merit in both these methods, and I can see how sometimes they would make more sense in certain circumstances. So let's take a look at some of those other circumstances. So problem 2, I was going to say 1 3/4. We're going to subtract out 6/7. Okay. Two different methods that we can use here. Method 1, method 2. And on this one, we're taking the 6/7 from the 1. We're just going to do it that way. I'm going to draw a number line. I want you to be drawing number lines so that you can get a great visual of what's going on. I'm starting, on this one, I'm starting at my 1 because I'm not going to worry about my 3/4. So I'm starting here. I'm taking away 6/7 pink. So when I subtract my 6/7, I'm right here, and I know that there's only 1/7 left over. So that's 1/7. That's where that spot is. And then I'm adding back in that 3/4 that I have to get a total. So if I wrote this out, then 1 minus 6/7 would equal 1/7. If you think about that, you can think about it in terms of, instead of the 1, if we're putting it in sevenths, how many sevenths would it be? It would be 7 sevenths, right? And if I subtracted 6 sevenths, I would have 1/7 left. So there's that. And then I need to add back in my 3/4. Once again, it's because I had those 2 cakes and I didn't want to bother with cutting up this other little piece. I just wanted to take it straight from my whole cake. So now I have to be like, oh, what do I have left over? I have these 2 things, and now I have to add. And I know adding seems kind of counterintuitive here, but it's what you got to do. 1/7 and 3/4. I know I'm going to deal with 28ths. And if I'm doing that, well, let's do 7 times what is 28? It's 4. So multiply the bottom by 4 and the top by 4. So I'm going to get 4 28ths. And 4 times 7 is 28. So 3 times 7 is 21. And I'm going to get a total of 25 28ths. Okay, that's what I have left. Method 2, I'm going to take my 1 and 3/4, and I'm going to turn that into, how many fourths I have. So my 1 is 4/4 and 3/4. And so how many total fourths do I have? Well, I have 7/4. So now I can just do 7/4 and subtract out 6/7. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I got to find my 28ths, right? 4 times 7, right? It's 28. And 7 times 7 would be 49. 7 times 4 is 28. And 6 times 4 is 24. So subtract them out. 25 28ths, and we arrived at the same answer. So, which way was easier there for you? They're both pretty easy. I kind of like this one better. I don't know why. You're free to choose whichever method works best for you. Let's do problem 3. Problem 3. Let's do 3 1/4 minus 2 1/2. Two different methods. Two different methods of doing this. If you're looking at me like, I don't get that one, but I get this one, then don't even listen to me talk about the other one. Just tune me out for a second. Although I do want you to try and open your mind. Maybe the one method isn't so bad. 1, 2, I got 3. I'm starting with 3. Okay. When I visualize this, I'm going to do 3 1/4 minus 2 1/2. I'm basically going to forget about this for a second, and I'm going to start with my 3, and I'm going to do subtract 2 1/2. So there's 2 1/2, puts me right here at 1/2, right? And then I got to remember that, oh yeah, there was a quarter there, so I got to go ahead a quarter. Plus 1/4. 1/2 plus 1/4. I mean, when I think about this, I think about money. If I have a half a dollar, it's 50 cents. Plus a $1/4, that's a quarter, 75 cents. 75 is 3/4. And I know I have 3/4. If I want to, if I needed to, I could turn my half into quarters, right? I don't need, my common denominator here would be 4. And 2 to 4 is multiplied by 2, right? So it would be 2/4 plus 1/4. And that does equal my 3/4. Method 1 was easier on this one, I'd say. But let's try method 2. 3 1/4 of my minus 2 1/2. Let's do 3 minus 2. 3 minus 2 would leave me with 1 1/4 minus 1/2. And 1 is 4/4. And I have my 1/4, which is going to leave me a total of 5/4. 5/4 minus 1/2. Nice job. 1/2. 5/4 minus 1/2. 1/2 is 2/4. So 5 minus 2 is going to equal 3/4. Two different ways about doing this. Oh, I didn't even draw a number line for this one. Shame on me. If I did this, I would start off at 3 1/4. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I could have 0 down here. And starting off with 3 1/4 here, and I'm going to subtract away 2, so that would be 1, 2 would be there, and then 1/2. It's going to put me someplace around 3/4. Minus 2 1/2. Awesome number line there, Mr. Evans. Thank you very much. We could do another one, but I think it would just end up being the same, and you would get it. But hey, I got it. You got something else better to do right now than subtract fractions? No. I'm just going to leave it here and say, which method are you going to pick? If you're doing method 1, you're going to be subtracting 4 minus 3 2/3. And if you're doing method 2, you're going to be doing 4 minus 3 is 1. So you're going to take 1 1/2, and you're going to subtract out 2/3. And you're finding common denominators over here. Well, that's I mean, 4 minus 3 is 1, and then subtract out 2/3. You're left with 1/3, and then you need to add in your 1/2. Over here, you got to flip it into halves. Well, how many halves is 1 1/2? It's 3 halves, right? 3 halves minus 2/3, and solve from there. I hope one of these methods is working for you. If you're looking at these methods and you're like, I don't get either one of those, then make sure that you're posting questions, approaching me in class, writing me a letter and sending it in the mail. Stop by my house and ask me a few questions. Don't do that one. Don't do that one. I probably won't be home, or I won't answer it. So I hope this is working for you. If it's not, please, like I said, let me know. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you're super awesome. Super duper awesome. today's keyword is hippopotamus. And so if you made it all this way and you got hippopotamus, don't tell anybody else. Remember hippopotamus, and come into class tomorrow and come up to me quietly and say, Mr. Abbott, hippopotamus, and I'll reward you. Okay, have a great night. See you later, alligator.